Hello, my lovelies. Can we normalize that it's okay to cry? It's okay. There is no problem with crying. It's something that I struggled with for the longest time. Felt so much shame in regards to crying, especially in front of people. But I'm here today to tell you it's okay to cry. There is nothing wrong with it. So the reason why I wanted to film this video is because, like I said, I always felt a lot of shame and guilt around crying. I feel like our culture and society and our upbringing influences the way how we feel about certain emotions. I feel like especially in Western culture, crying can sometimes be seen as a sign of weakness or being too sensitive. And it's ridiculous because I feel like sensitivity has always gotten a bad rep. There is power in sensitivity and there's nothing wrong with being sensitive. And so people associate crying with being sensitive, like, oh, you feel too much, you're too sensitive, like, stop crying, like, why aren't you over it? Why are you still sad?
Why are you still crying?
Have you heard those before? I know I have growing up. And so we start associating, oh, crying is bad, sadness is bad, like we shouldn't do that, we should avoid doing that at all costs. So then we bottle it up inside of us, right? Like we hold it in. Have you ever done that where you want to cry so bad, but depending on the environment or where you are at that time, you just hold it in because you'd feel embarrassed, because you don't want to call attention to yourself, because you don't want to be seen as sensitive or weak or emotional. So you hold it in and you bottle it up, and you either wait until you get home and you cry, or you just never cry at all and you just keep it inside of you. And what's really helped me kind of overcome this fear and shame of crying, especially in front of other people, is practicing emotional intelligence and learning more about my emotions and how emotions aren't bad. Like, we're supposed to feel all of the emotions. That's why they all exist.
We're supposed to feel all of the things.
The problem is when we define ourselves by our emotions or when we hold on to them for too long. So it's important to feel it and then let it go. And I feel, at least from my own experience, that when I was ashamed of crying, I would just bottle it up. And I feel by not letting those emotions pass through me, it just made me feel worse. They just built up inside. And then maybe a few weeks or even months after, I would explode. I really think that when we don't express our emotions, they kind of just get stuck within us, and that's not healthy. So now I'm like, oh, okay, I'm feeling like crying.
We're gonna cry.
And so what inspired this video was that I was actually, and I shared this in my last vlog where I was talking about my whole ordeal lately with my panic attacks and anxiety. You can go check that video out in the channel if you want to watch it. But I talked about how I was in an airport in Texas waiting to fly back to Miami, and my mom was in the hospital at the time, and I was just very stressed and frustrated, and I felt like that feeling building up inside me, like I feel like I need to cry. And you know what I did? I cried in the middle of the airport with like people everywhere. I was there with my fiance Ben, and then we had two friends that were there with us too, and I just started crying in front of them. And it's like, I'm not looking for sympathy. I'm not looking for words of comfort. Like, I have zero expectations from anybody. Like, I don't expect anybody to do anything or manage my emotions for me. I just need to let the emotions out. And so I cried. I walked around the airport crying. I sat in the chair at the airport and cried there as well. I cried in the airplane a bit. And you know what? I feel like if I would have held that in, I would have felt 20 times worse, because that would have just built up inside of me. It was a big win for me because I was always ashamed about crying in front of people and even by myself. Like, that's the thing, when we're conditioned to feel negatively about a certain emotion, is that when we then experience that emotion, we go through like this shame cycle where it's almost like we repeat to ourselves the same things that people used to repeat to us when we were younger. Like,
why are you crying? Like, get over it. Why are you so sensitive? Like, oh, I'm so weak.
And all of those things, we're just parroting the same
Crap.
that we used to hear back when we were children. And so like, you have to break the shame cycle, and because it doesn't make you feel any better, it's just gonna make you feel worse, because then you're crying and then you get upset about the fact that you're crying. So I think we just need to disconnect and dissociate crying with weakness. Since we are capable of crying, then there shouldn't be anything wrong with crying every once in a while. I'm the type of person who angry cries. Like, when I get angry, I cry. But I'm also the type of person that when I'm really happy and moved, I cry as well. So like, crying is associated to so many things. Like, we associate crying with sadness, but you can cry when you're happy. And there's nothing wrong with that when you're that moved about something that your body just needs to let out tears. I think that's honestly kind of beautiful. So the next time that you feel like crying, it may be hard if you're in front like of a room of people or people that you don't feel comfortable with. When you're on your own, it may be easier to release the emotions. When you're alone and you feel it, cry, let it out. It's almost cathartic to cry and just release the emotions. So release it and then let it go and move on. Like, there's no need to hold on to it. And that's the problem. When we don't cry, we're technically holding on to those emotions and those feelings, right? So when you cry, you're just picture yourself just
letting it go.
And if those feelings of shame start popping up, and you start hearing those negative thoughts in your head, like, why am I crying? Oh, I'm so pathetic, or yada, 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 any of that stuff, acknowledge it and be like, okay, I hear that. I'm not going to focus on that, because just because I'm thinking it doesn't mean that it's true or that it's my reality. So as you do that, you'll become more comfortable with crying, and then maybe eventually,
like me,
you'll be able to cry in front of everybody and strangers and honestly not give an F. I was so unbothered. I was just like, I just need a sob right now. I need a good sob. And if anybody's uncomfortable, you guys can just keep going and move on with your day. I wouldn't have done that maybe 5 years ago, but I'm proud that I chose to do that now. So my challenge for you now is, the next time you feel like crying, let it out. If you're around people and you don't feel comfortable quite yet, I totally get it. But then when you're on your own and you feel like crying, let it out. Just release it. Release the emotion. Don't hold it in. We don't want to keep it inside ourselves. We don't want to let it build up. Just release it. Just cry. It can be very cathartic. Sometimes I feel so light after I have a good cry session. And if you start hearing like those negative thought patterns, like, oh, why am I crying? Oh, why am I not over this? Oh, I'm so pathetic. Stop. Acknowledge it and be like, okay, just because I'm thinking it doesn't mean it's my reality, and it doesn't mean it's true. Just push it aside and just let it all out. As you keep doing that, you'll start feeling less guilt and shame around it, which will also make you bounce back from it faster, because then you can just cry and move on with your day instead of crying and then feeling bad about it afterwards. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you found this video helpful and made you feel a little less alone if you've been feeling ashamed for crying over something, or if you're going through a rough time. If you enjoyed this video, I post videos about self-love and fashion every week, so you can go check those out on my channel as well. Remember, crying is okay. And I will see you in the next video. Bye! Love you!